My name is Rachel. I'm 34 years old. 3 weeks ago, I stood in a funeral home wearing a black dress I'd bought 6 hours earlier because my father died without anyone bothering to tell me until it was almost too late. I made it to his service with 40 minutes to spare, driving 4 hours through a rainstorm because my mother decided I didn't need to know my own father was dying. She claimed she didn't want to worry me. But that's not even the part that destroyed everything. The part that destroyed everything came after the service. When my mother walked up to me with mascara streaking down her face, handed me a small wooden box and said, "Your father wanted you to have this. He made me promise." What I didn't know was that inside that box was a letter my father had written 3 years ago, and that letter contained the truth about everything my mother had done, everything she had hidden, and the real reason I'd spent my entire adult life feeling like I was somehow broken, somehow unworthy of my own family's love. I'm going to tell you what was in that letter. I'm going to tell you what my father confessed from beyond the grave. And I'm going to tell you what happened when I read those words out loud at the reception in front of my mother, my sister, and 47 members of my extended family. But I need to start at the beginning because you need to understand the pattern before you can understand why that letter didn't just change my life. It ended my mother's. Before I tell you what happened, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story resonates with you. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I have a feeling this story is going to hit home for a lot of you. Let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in Ridgewood, New Jersey, in a 4-bedroom colonial with green shutters and a wraparound porch. From the outside, we looked like any other upper-middle-class family. My father was a financial consultant. My mother was a homemaker, though what she actually made was chaos and manipulation disguised as maternal concern. My sister Claire was born when I was 4 years old, and from the moment she arrived, something shifted in our house that never shifted back. I want to be clear about something. I don't believe my mother woke up every day and consciously chose to treat me differently than my sister. I think it was something deeper, something instinctive, something she probably couldn't even see in herself. But the effect was the same whether she intended it or not. I was the difficult one. Claire was the easy one. I was too sensitive. Claire was appropriately emotional. I asked too many questions. Claire was curious and bright. The same behaviors, filtered through two different lenses, became two completely different stories. The first memory I have of feeling truly invisible was my 8th birthday party. My mother had planned this elaborate princess-themed party for Claire the year before. She'd rented a bouncy castle, hired a face painter, invited Claire's entire second-grade class, and ordered a custom cake shaped like Cinderella's carriage. Claire talked about that party for months. She had a photo album dedicated just to that one day. When my 8th birthday came around, my mother sat me down at the kitchen table 2 weeks beforehand and explained that we were going to do something more intimate this year. Money was tight, she said. Dad had a big project that wasn't going well, she said. I could invite 3 friends for pizza and cake at the house, and we'd watch a movie. That was my birthday. I remember sitting at that table and nodding, telling her that sounded great, that I didn't need a big party anyway. I remember the relief on her face when I didn't argue. And I remember going to my room afterward and crying into my pillow because I didn't understand what I'd done wrong, why Claire deserved a carriage cake and I deserved 3 friends and a Domino's pizza. But here's the thing. I told myself it made sense. Dad was stressed about work. Money was tight. I was being a good daughter by not complaining. I was being mature. 6 weeks after my intimate birthday, my mother threw Claire a surprise half-birthday party. She invited 12 kids. There was a magician, and the cake was shaped like a unicorn. I didn't say anything. I just added it to the mental file I was already keeping, the file labeled, Things that don't make sense but probably do if I think about them hard enough. My father was different. My father saw me. I know that now, though I didn't fully understand it when I was young. He was the one who came to my room after the birthday comparison and sat on the edge of my bed and said, "Rachel, I want you to know that what happened wasn't fair, and I'm sorry." I remember looking up at him and feeling confused. "What do you mean?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Your mother loves you very much, but sometimes love doesn't look the same for everyone, and that's not your fault." I didn't understand what he meant. I was 8, but I filed those words away too, in a different mental folder. The folder labeled "Things Dad Says That Feel Important." He kissed my forehead and left. And the next morning, everything was normal again, and I convinced myself I'd imagined the whole conversation. The second major example happened when I was 14. My mother had decided that Claire, at 10, was ready for ballet lessons. Not just any ballet lessons. Lessons at the Westchester Academy of Dance, which was 45 minutes away and cost, I later learned, $400 a month. Claire would need leotards, ballet slippers, point shoes when she advanced, and my mother would need to drive her 3 times a week. It was a significant investment of time and money. I watched this unfold with a kind of detached curiosity. I'd asked for soccer when I was 11. My mother had told me it was too expensive and too far away, even though the league was 15 minutes from our house and cost $150 for the entire season. I'd accepted that answer because that's what I did. I accepted things. But watching Claire get fitted for her first leotard, watching my mother beam with pride as Claire did a clumsy plie in our living room, something cracked inside me. Not broke, just cracked. Just enough to let some light in. I went to my father that night. He was in his home office, working late as usual. I knocked on the door frame, and he looked up with that tired but warm smile he always had for me. "Dad," I said, "can I ask you something?" "Always." I took a breath. "How come Claire gets ballet lessons when you said no to soccer for me?" His face did something complicated. The smile faded, and for a moment he looked almost pained. He set down his pen and gestured for me to sit in the chair across from his desk. "That's a fair question," he said, "and you deserve an honest answer." I waited. He rubbed his eyes. "Your mother makes a lot of the decisions about you girls and your activities. I don't always agree with those decisions, but we've agreed to disagree on some things to keep the peace. So you would have said yes to soccer." "I would have said yes to soccer," he confirmed. "I would have driven you myself." Something warm spread through my chest. Not happiness, exactly, but validation. The knowledge that I wasn't crazy, that what felt unfair actually was unfair. "Can I ask you something else?" I said. "Of course." "Why does Mom treat me differently than Claire?" The question hung in the air between us. My father was quiet for a long time. Long enough that I started to worry I'd said something wrong, asked something I shouldn't have. Finally, he said, "Rachel, I want you to listen to me carefully. What I'm about to tell you is important, and I need you to remember it, even if you don't fully understand it right now." I nodded. "Your mother has complicated feelings about you. They have nothing to do with who you are or what you've done. They have to do with things that happened before you were old enough to understand. And I know that's not a satisfying answer. I know it probably makes you feel worse, not better. But I need you to trust me when I tell you that this is not your fault. It has never been your fault. And one day, when you're older, I'll explain everything. I promise." I left his office that night with more questions than answers. But I also left with something I hadn't had before. The certainty that I wasn't imagining things. That my father saw what I saw. that I wasn't crazy. I held on to that certainty for the next 20 years. The third example happened at my high school graduation. I was 17, salutatorian of my class, headed to Boston University in the fall on a partial academic scholarship. I had worked incredibly hard for that ranking, for that scholarship, for the chance to prove that I was worth something, that I deserved to take up space in the world. Graduation day arrived in early June, one of those perfect late spring mornings with clear skies and the smell of fresh cut grass. My mother had helped Claire get ready for the ceremony, even though Claire was only 13 and not the one graduating. She'd French braided Claire's hair and picked out a dress for her to wear, and taken approximately 24 photos of Claire before we left the house. She took one photo of me. One, in my cap and gown, standing by the front door, looking slightly confused because I'd expected more photos and didn't understand why she'd put the camera away so quickly. At the ceremony, I gave my speech. It was about resilience, about finding your own worth when the world doesn't hand it to you, about being your own advocate. I didn't realize until years later that I was talking about my family without saying their names. I received a standing ovation. I looked out into the audience for my parents, wanting to see pride on their faces, wanting to feel like I had finally done something worthy of their attention. My father was on his feet, clapping, his eyes wet with tears. He looked like the proudest man in the world. My mother was checking her phone. After the ceremony, families gathered on the lawn for photos and congratulations. My father hugged me so tightly I couldn't breathe, whispered in my ear, "I am so proud of you, Rachel. You have no idea how proud." My mother hugged me too, but it was brief, distracted. She pulled back and said, "We need to get going soon. Claire has a recital at 3. I remember standing there in my cap and gown, holding my salutatorian certificate, watching my mother usher Claire toward the car because we couldn't be late for a ballet recital that happened every month while my high school graduation happened exactly once. My father squeezed my shoulder. "We'll celebrate tonight," he said quietly. "Just us. I promise." And we did. He took me to dinner at my favorite restaurant, just the two of us, while my mother stayed home with Claire. He ordered champagne even though I couldn't legally drink it, and he let me have one glass. And he told me stories about his own graduation, about his own dreams, about the person he'd hoped to become. "You're going to do amazing things," he told me, "and I'm going to be watching, even when you don't know I'm there, even when I can't say it out loud. I'm always going to be watching, and I'm always going to be proud." I didn't understand what he meant by, "even when I can't say it out loud." I thought he was just being poetic. I thought fathers said things like that to make their daughters feel special. I had no idea he was trying to tell me something important, something that would take me 20 years to fully understand. I want to pause here and explain what happened after I left for college, because this is where the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. My freshman year at Boston University, I called home every Sunday night. That was the routine I established. Every Sunday at 7 p.m., I would sit in my dorm room and call my parents. My mother answered most of the time. We would talk for exactly 15 minutes, during which she would update me on Claire's ballet achievements, Claire's school accomplishments, Claire's social life, and then ask, almost as an afterthought, "How are you?" I would say I was fine. She would say she was glad. And then she would hand the phone to my father, who would talk to me for another 45 minutes about everything my mother hadn't asked. My classes, my friends, my worries, my hopes, my fears. Those conversations with my father were the brightest part of my weeks. Sophomore year, I needed money. The scholarship covered tuition, but I was working 2 part-time jobs to cover room, board, and books, and it wasn't enough. I was falling behind on my meal plan payments. I was eating 1 meal a day to make the budget work. I was exhausted and stressed and desperate. I called home and explained the situation. I asked if they could help just temporarily until I could pick up more hours at work. My mother's response was instantaneous. Rachel, we've already contributed significantly to your education. Your scholarship was supposed to cover these things. If you can't manage your money properly, that's not our responsibility to fix. I reminded her that Claire's ballet lessons cost $400 a month. There was a long silence. Then my mother said, Claire is still a child living under our roof. You are an adult who chose to move across the country. These are different situations. I'm 19, I said. Claire is 15. It's 4 years. Don't be dramatic, Rachel. You always do this. You always turn everything into some kind of competition with your sister. It's very unattractive. I hung up the phone and cried for 2 hours. Then I got another part-time job, bringing my total to 3, and I didn't call home for 6 weeks. My father called me. He didn't mention the money conversation. He just said he missed hearing my voice, and then he talked to me for an hour about nothing and everything. At the end of the call, he said, Rachel, check your account tomorrow. I checked my account the next day. There was a deposit of $3,000, no note, no explanation, just the money. I called him to say thank you. He answered on the first ring. Dad, we don't need to talk about it, he said. Just take care of yourself. That's all I want. Does Mom know? The pause was answer enough. Your mother and I have separate accounts for certain things. This came from mine. It's nobody's business but ours. I thanked him again. He told me he loved me, and then he said something that stuck with me. One day this will all make sense. I'm so sorry it doesn't make sense now. I graduated from Boston University with honors. I got a job at a marketing firm in Philadelphia, moved into my own apartment, started building a life for myself. I called home less often, visited less often, and told myself it was because I was busy building my career, not because every interaction with my mother left me feeling empty and small. My father and I developed our own relationship, separate from the family. He would call me on Tuesday evenings just to chat. He would send me cards on every holiday, always with handwritten notes that said things like, I'm thinking of you and you make me proud every day. When I got promoted, he sent flowers to my office with a card that said, the world is finally seeing what I've always known. When Claire graduated high school, I flew home for the ceremony. I watched my mother take 73 photos of Claire before we left the house. I watched her give a toast at the graduation party about how Claire was the light of her life, her pride and joy, her greatest accomplishment. My father found me in the backyard afterward, sitting alone on the old porch swing. I'm sorry, he said quietly, sitting down beside me. For what? For all of it, for not being stronger, for not fighting harder, for letting her... He trailed off, shook his head. You deserved better, Rachel. You have always deserved better, and I should have given it to you. I looked at him. He looked old suddenly, tired in a way I hadn't noticed before. Why didn't you? I asked. Why did you let her treat me like that? He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because I was afraid that if I pushed too hard, she would take you both away from me. And losing you entirely was worse than watching you get hurt. I know that doesn't make it okay. I know that was selfish. But I want you to know that not a day has gone by when I haven't regretted it. Dad, one day, he said, I'm going to tell you everything. When I'm ready, when I figured out how to explain it, I'm writing it all down, Rachel. Everything you need to know. And when the time comes, you'll understand. I didn't know what he meant. I didn't ask. I just leaned my head on his shoulder and watched the fireflies blink in the darkness, and I told myself that one day everything would make sense. That was 11 years ago. My father never found the right time to explain. He never sat me down and told me everything. He died 3 weeks ago, suddenly, of a heart attack, in his sleep at the age of 67. And my mother didn't tell me he was gone until 6 hours before the funeral. Okay, I need to pause here for a second. I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt like the black sheep of your family? Like no matter what you accomplished, no matter how hard you tried, you were somehow less than? Type your answer in the comments. And if this story is hitting close to home, please hit that like button so more people can find it. I think a lot of us carry these wounds in silence, and maybe talking about them helps us all heal a little bit. Now let me tell you about the day my father died. It was a Tuesday, October 15th. I remember because I had a client presentation that morning, a big one, and I was nervous about it. I'd been up since 5 a.m. going over my notes, drinking coffee, pacing my apartment in Philadelphia. The presentation went well. My boss told me afterward that the client had specifically asked to work with me going forward. I was on a high when I left the office at 4 p.m. I checked my phone in the elevator. I had 16 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. I had 43 text messages from various family members. I had one voicemail. The voicemail was from my Aunt Patricia, my father's sister. Her voice was thick with tears. "Rachel, honey, I don't know if anyone's told you yet, but your father passed away this morning. The funeral is tomorrow at 2 p.m. at St. Michael's. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. Please call me when you get this." I stood in that elevator for a full minute after the doors opened, not moving, not breathing, just staring at my phone. My father had died that morning. That morning. And I was finding out at 4 p.m. the next day from an aunt I rarely spoke to through a voicemail. I called my mother. She answered on the third ring, sounding annoyed. "Rachel, I assumed Patricia would tell you. Tell me that Dad died. Why didn't you call me?" I had a lot to deal with. The funeral home, the obituary, the catering for the reception. Claire was here helping me. I assumed someone would let you know. You assumed someone... I couldn't finish the sentence. I couldn't breathe. "Mom, he's my father. He was my father. You were supposed to tell me." "Don't be dramatic, Rachel. You found out, didn't you? The funeral is tomorrow at 2. We're doing a reception at the house afterward. Try not to make this about you." She hung up. I stood in the parking garage of my office building and screamed. Not a word, just a sound, raw and primal and full of 20 years of grief I hadn't known I was carrying. A security guard came running. I told him I was fine. I got in my car, and I drove 4 hours through a rainstorm to say goodbye to my father. I made it to the church with 40 minutes to spare. My black dress was from a department store near the highway, purchased during a frantic stop when I realized I hadn't packed anything appropriate. My eyes were swollen from crying. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my purse. The church was already filling up when I arrived. I slipped into a pew near the back, not wanting to draw attention, not wanting to make this about me. That's what my mother had said, right? Don't make this about you. So I sat in the back row like a guest at a stranger's funeral and watched my family grieve a man they hadn't let me say goodbye to. My mother sat in the front row with Claire on one side and my Uncle Richard on the other. She was wearing a black Chanel suit and a single strand of pearls. She looked elegant, composed, the picture of dignified grief. Claire was crying quietly into a tissue. She looked genuinely devastated. I felt a flash of complicated emotion, something between sympathy and resentment. Claire had been there when Dad died. Claire had gotten to hold his hand. Claire had gotten to say goodbye. I had gotten a voicemail from my aunt. The service was beautiful. My father's colleagues spoke about his brilliance, his kindness, his integrity. His golf buddies talked about his sense of humor. His brother gave a eulogy that made everyone laugh and cry in equal measure. My mother spoke briefly about their 40 years of marriage, about the life they'd built together, about the family he'd loved so much. She didn't mention me by name. Not once. She mentioned Claire twice. She mentioned herself 7 times. She mentioned my father's work, his hobbies, his friends. But somehow, in a 5-minute eulogy about the family he'd loved so much, she forgot to mention her oldest daughter. I sat in that pew and felt something shift inside me. Not crack this time. Shift. Like tectonic plates finally grinding into a new position after decades of pressure. After the service, there was a receiving line. People hugged my mother and Claire, offering condolences, sharing memories. I stood off to the side, accepting the occasional handshake from someone who recognized me, mostly feeling invisible. That's when my Aunt Patricia found me. She was my father's younger sister, a woman with my father's same warm eyes and gentle smile. She hugged me tightly, and I almost broke down right there. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" she asked. "I just found out yesterday," I said. "Mom didn't call me." Patricia's face went still. Something flickered in her eyes, something that looked like recognition, like she wasn't surprised at all. "I know," she said quietly. "That's why I called you myself. I couldn't believe it when I found out you didn't know. Rachel, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for all of it." "All of what?" She opened her mouth to answer, but then she looked over my shoulder and her expression changed. She squeezed my hand. "We'll talk later," she said. "There's a lot you need to know. Things your father wanted you to know." She pressed something into my hand, a business card. "Call me tomorrow. Please, it's important." Then she walked away, and I looked down at the card in my hand. It had her name, her phone number, and a single word handwritten on the back: soon. The reception was at my parents' house, the same green-shuttered colonial I'd grown up in. Walking through that front door felt like stepping into a time machine, everything exactly the same as it had been when I'd left for college, like my mother had preserved it in amber. The living room was filled with people in black, eating tiny sandwiches and speaking in hushed voices about what a wonderful man my father had been. I drifted through the crowd like a ghost, accepting condolences from people who looked at me with mild confusion, like they couldn't quite place who I was or why I was there. I was in the kitchen, refilling my water glass, when my mother found me. She was holding a small wooden box, about the size of a jewelry case, made of dark cherry wood with brass hinges. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't read, something between reluctance and obligation. "Your father wanted you to have this," she said. "He made me promise to give it to you after he was gone." I took the box from her hands. It was heavier than it looked. "What is it?" "I don't know. He never told me. He just said you needed to have it, and that you'd understand." Her lips pressed into a thin line. He was always so dramatic about things like this. She walked away before I could respond. I stood in the kitchen of my childhood home, holding that box, feeling my heart pound in my chest. My father had left me something. He'd made my mother promise to give it to me, and she didn't know what was inside. I should have waited. I should have taken the box somewhere private, somewhere I could be alone with whatever my father had left me. But something compelled me to open it right there, right then, standing next to the refrigerator covered in photos of Claire's achievements while the distant sound of mourners murmured in the living room. I lifted the lid. Inside was a letter, a thick one, handwritten on cream-colored paper, folded into thirds. Beneath the letter was a small envelope, also sealed with the words "Bank Information" written on the front. And beneath that was a photograph. The photograph was of my father and a woman I didn't recognize. They were standing in front of a hospital, both smiling, and my father was holding a newborn baby wrapped in a pink blanket. The baby was me. I could tell from the date written on the back of the photo, March 15th, 1990, my birthday. But the woman was not my mother. I stared at that photograph for a long time, long enough that the kitchen seemed to disappear around me, long enough that the murmur of voices faded into white noise, long enough that my entire understanding of my life began to crack and shift and rearrange itself into something unrecognizable. The woman in the photograph had dark hair like mine. She had my nose, my chin, the shape of my eyes. She was looking at the baby in my father's arms with an expression of pure, overwhelming love. And my father was looking at her the same way. I set the photograph aside and unfolded the letter. My father's handwriting. Neat, precise, familiar, from 20 years of birthday cards and holiday notes, and the occasional letter he'd sent me during college. I could almost hear his voice as I read. My dearest Rachel, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I never found the courage to tell you the truth while I was alive. I'm sorry. I've been sorry for 34 years, and I'll be sorry for whatever comes after death, if anything does. But being sorry doesn't change what I did, and it doesn't change what you deserve to know. Rachel, the woman who raised you, is not your biological mother. Your mother's name was Elena Vasquez. She was the love of my life. We met when I was 25 and she was 23, and we had a love affair that lasted 3 years, until she died giving birth to you. Yes, your mother died giving birth to you, and I have lied to you about this your entire life. Here is the truth. When Elena passed away, I was devastated. I was a single father with a newborn baby and no idea how to cope with either the grief or the responsibility. I made a decision in my darkest moment that I have regretted every day since. I allowed my family to pressure me into marrying Margaret Thorne, a woman from our social circle who wanted a husband and the appearance of a family. We struck a deal. She would raise you as her own, and in exchange, I would provide her with the lifestyle she wanted and the image of a perfect family. She never loved you, Rachel. I knew that from the beginning. I told myself that it didn't matter, that I would love you enough for both of us, that I would protect you from her coldness. I told myself that having a mother, any mother, was better than having no mother at all. I was wrong. I was so terribly wrong. Margaret resented you from the beginning. You were a constant reminder of Elena, a living embodiment of the love I'd had before her, the love she could never compete with. When Claire was born, Margaret finally had a child that was fully hers, and the difference in how she treated you both became impossible to ignore. I tried to intervene. I tried to insist that she treat you fairly, but she threatened to leave and take Claire with her, and in those days, court sided with mothers. I was afraid of losing both of you, so I stayed silent when I should have spoken up, and I let you suffer for my cowardice. I am so sorry, but there is more you need to know. After Elena died, her family tried to maintain contact with you. Her mother, your grandmother, wanted to be part of your life. Her sister, your Aunt Lucia, begged me to let them see you. But Margaret refused. She said it would confuse you, that you needed to believe she was your real mother, that outside influences would undermine her authority. I went along with it because I was weak. I let her cut you off from your mother's entire family, people who loved you, people who wanted you, people who would have treated you the way you deserved to be treated. Rachel, your grandmother is still alive. Her name is Rosa Vasquez, and she lives in Philadelphia. She has tried to contact you many times over the years. Every letter, every card, every gift she sent was intercepted by Margaret. She has an entire storage unit full of things she saved for you, waiting for the day when you would finally know the truth. I have included her contact information in this box, along with the information for a bank account I set up in your name when you were born. I have been depositing money into it for 34 years. It contains everything I wanted to give you and couldn't. Your college fund, your inheritance, the money that should have been yours, instead of going toward Claire's dance lessons and Margaret's shopping trips. The total is $473,000. It's yours. It's always been yours. I know this letter raises more questions than it answers. I know you probably hate me right now, and you have every right to. I kept the truth from you to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to maintain a family that was built on lies. I chose the easy path when I should have chosen you. But I want you to know that I have always loved you. From the moment Elena placed you in my arms, you were the most important thing in my world. Everything good I ever did, I did for you. And everything terrible I allowed to happen, I allowed because I was afraid of losing you. I hope you can forgive me. But even if you can't, I hope you can find the truth, reconnect with your real family, and finally understand that you were never the problem. It was never about you. It was about Margaret's inability to love a child that wasn't hers, and my inability to protect you from that failure. I love you, Rachel. I have always loved you, and I am so proud of the woman you've become despite everything we put you through. Your father, Richard Warren, P.S. I have sent a copy of this letter to my lawyer with instructions to read it aloud if Margaret denies you the original. I have also sent copies to Patricia and to Rosa. The truth will come out one way or another. I am making sure of that. P.P.S. There's one more thing. Margaret has been telling people for years that you don't visit, that you don't call, that you've abandoned the family. She has shown people fake text messages and emails to prove it. I don't know how she did it, but I want you to know. I never believed her. I always knew the truth, and now everyone else will too. I read that letter 3 times. I read it standing in the kitchen, and then I read it sitting on the floor because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore, and then I read it one more time just to make sure I wasn't dreaming, wasn't hallucinating, wasn't losing my mind in the middle of my father's funeral reception. My mother was not my mother. I had a grandmother who loved me, who had tried to reach me, who was waiting for me in Philadelphia. My father had left me nearly $500,000, and everything I had ever believed about my life was a lie. I don't know how long I sat on that kitchen floor, long enough for the light to shift, long enough for my legs to go numb, long enough for someone to eventually find me. It was Claire. She appeared in the doorway, looking confused. "Rachel, what are you doing on the floor? People are asking where you went." I looked up at her. My sister, my half-sister, the golden child, the one who was loved unconditionally because she was Margaret's actual daughter, because she was wanted, because she belonged. "Did you know?" I asked. Claire frowned. "Know what?" I held up the letter. "Did you know that we have different mothers? Did you know that your mother intercepted letters from my grandmother for 30 years? Did you know that I have a bank account with almost $500,000 that Dad was hiding from Margaret?" Claire's face went pale. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. What? Rachel, what are you talking about?" I pushed myself to my feet. My legs were shaking, but something inside me was steady. Something inside me was very, very calm. "Let me show you," I said. I walked past Claire, out of the kitchen, into the living room where 47 people were still milling around eating canapes and discussing what a wonderful man my father had been. I walked straight to the center of the room, and I began to read the letter aloud. The room went silent within the first paragraph. By the second paragraph, people were exchanging confused glances. By the third paragraph, someone gasped. By the fourth paragraph, my mother's face had gone from composed to panicked, and she was pushing through the crowd toward me. "Rachel, stop this immediately," she said. "You're making a scene. You don't know what you're— I don't know what I'm doing." I looked at her, at this woman who had raised me, who had made me feel small and worthless and unwanted for 30 years. "I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm telling the truth. For the first time in my life, I'm telling the truth." "This is not the time or place," she hissed. "No, it's exactly the time and place. These people came here to honor Dad. Don't you think they deserve to know who he really was? Don't you think they deserve to know what you did?" "I didn't do anything." "Your father was clearly not in his right mind when he wrote that. He was confused. He sent a copy to his lawyer," I said, "and to Aunt Patricia, and to my grandmother. The one you told me was dead." The room went even more silent, if that was possible. Aunt Patricia stepped forward. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "She's telling the truth," Patricia said. "Richard told me everything before he died. He wanted me to be here in case Margaret tried to suppress the letter. He knew she would try." Margaret turned to face Patricia. "You're part of this? You're helping her humiliate me at my own husband's funeral?" "Your husband?" Patricia laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Richard spent 40 years trapped in a marriage he never wanted, with a woman who made his daughter's life miserable. He stayed because he was afraid of losing Rachel entirely. He stayed because you threatened him, Margaret. Don't pretend you were some kind of victim." "I was a victim. I raised another woman's child. I gave up everything to—" "You gave up nothing," I said. My voice was calm, controlled, completely steady. "You had a free ride for 40 years. You had a husband who paid for everything, a daughter you could mold in your own image, and a stepdaughter you could punish for existing. What exactly did you sacrifice?" "I loved you," Margaret said. "I raised you like my own." "You raised me like an inconvenience," I said, "like a reminder of something you wanted to forget, like a problem that wouldn't go away no matter how much you ignored it." I turned to face the room. 47 faces staring at me, some confused, some sympathetic, some clearly putting pieces together that had never quite fit before. "I want you all to know something," I said. "For years, Margaret has been telling people that I'm estranged, that I don't call, that I've abandoned the family. She showed you text messages and emails. She painted me as the ungrateful daughter who left and never looked back." I pulled out my phone. "I have phone records from the last 10 years. I have call logs that show I called this house every single week until 3 years ago, when Margaret stopped answering. I have emails I sent that were never responded to. And according to this letter, Margaret has been creating fake evidence to make me look like the villain." "That's not true," Margaret said. "I never—" "Actually," a voice interrupted, "I can confirm that." We all turned to see a man standing in the doorway. He was wearing a dark suit, carrying a briefcase, and he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "I'm Gregory Collins," he said, "Richard Warren's attorney. I was instructed to attend this reception and to intervene if necessary." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "I have copies of Mr. Warren's bank statements showing regular deposits to an account in Rachel's name. I have copies of intercepted correspondence from Elena Vasquez's family to Rachel, which were found in Mrs. Warren's personal storage unit. And I have copies of Margaret Warren's browser history, which shows she created a fake email account in Rachel's name to send manufactured messages to family members." The room erupted. I stood in the center of the chaos, watching Margaret's carefully constructed world fall apart around her. People were shouting questions, demanding explanations, turning to each other in shock and disbelief. Claire was standing in the corner crying, looking like she didn't know who to believe or who to comfort. And Margaret was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Fear. All right, I want to check in with you again. If you were in my position, would you have read that letter out loud at the reception? Or would you have waited, processed it privately, confronted Margaret in a different way? Type yes or no in the comments. I want to know what you would have done. And if you're dying to see what happens next, make sure you're subscribed. Now let me tell you what happened after the revelation. The next hour was a blur of activity. Gregory Collins, my father's lawyer, took charge of the situation. He produced document after document, bank records, intercepted letters, printouts of the fake email conversations Margaret had created. Each piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of the story Margaret had constructed. But it was the letters that broke me. There was a box in Gregory's possession, a box filled with 30 years of correspondence from my grandmother, Rosa Vasquez. Birthday cards for every year of my life, unopened. Christmas cards with handwritten notes about how much she missed me. Photos of family gatherings I was never invited to because I never knew they existed. Letters that started hopeful and gradually became desperate, pleading for any response, any acknowledgement that I was still alive and well. The most recent letter was dated 6 months ago. In it, my grandmother wrote, "Mi nieta, I don't know if you'll ever receive this. I've written to you so many times and I've never received a response. But your father promised me that one day you would know the truth. He promised me that one day I would get to hold you again. I pray every night that day will come. I love you. I have always loved you. And I will keep writing until my hands no longer work or my heart stops beating. Your abuela, Rosa." I held that letter and sobbed. Not quiet crying, not dignified tears, but deep, racking sobs that came from somewhere so far inside me I didn't know it existed. 30 years of grief for a mother I never knew, for a grandmother I should have had, for a family that had wanted me when the family I lived with never did. Aunt Patricia sat beside me and held my hand. She told me things I hadn't known, that my father had cried every time he sent money to my grandmother, trying to maintain some connection to Elena's family, even while Margaret forced them out of my life. That he had begged Margaret for years to let my grandmother visit, and she had threatened divorce every time. That he had lived in quiet agony, watching me grow up without the love I deserved, unable to fix what he had broken. He never stopped loving Elena, Patricia said, and he never stopped loving you. He just made terrible choices out of fear, and then he spent the rest of his life trying to atone for them in secret. Why didn't he just leave her? I asked. Why didn't he take me and go? Patricia sighed. He thought about it many times, but Margaret was manipulative. She made him believe that no court would grant custody to a single father, that she would paint him as unstable, that she would take Claire away and never let him see either of you again. And by the time the laws changed, by the time he might have had a chance, too much time had passed. You were grown. He thought it was too late to change anything. It wasn't too late, I said. He could have told me any time. He was afraid, Patricia said, afraid that you would hate him, afraid that the truth would hurt you more than the lies, afraid that you would reject him the same way Margaret rejected you. I would never have rejected him. I know. He knew that too, I think, deep down. But fear doesn't always make sense. While we talked, the reception had transformed into something else entirely. People were clustering in groups, whispering, shooting glances at Margaret, who had retreated to a corner with Claire. The atmosphere had shifted from mourning to scandal, from grief to revelation. Several of my father's colleagues approached me to offer apologies. They had believed Margaret's story about my estrangement. They had thought I was a neglectful daughter who had abandoned her family. Now they were realizing that everything they thought they knew was wrong. One of them, a man named David, who had worked with my father for 20 years, pulled me aside. "I want you to know something," he said. "Your father talked about you constantly. Every time I saw him, he had some story about something you'd accomplished, some update about your career, some expression of how proud he was. I always thought it was strange, given what Margaret said about you never calling. Now I understand." "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know." "There's something else," David said. He lowered his voice. "I'm on the board of the financial firm your father helped build. We've been discussing succession and legacy gifts. Your father earmarked a significant portion of his shares for a trust in your name. Margaret didn't know about it. She assumed everything would go to her." "How significant are we talking?" David smiled slightly. "Significant enough that you won't need to worry about money for the rest of your life, even without the bank account. Your father made sure of that." I thought about all the years I'd worked 3 jobs in college, all the times Margaret had told me money was tight, that they couldn't help me, that I needed to learn to be self-sufficient. All the while my father had been squirreling away a fortune for me, making sure that one day I would have everything I'd been denied. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I did both. The confrontation with Margaret came later, after most of the guests had left. She had tried to leave several times, but there were too many people wanting answers, too many documents requiring signature, too many lawyers and witnesses making it impossible for her to simply disappear into the night. Finally, when the house was nearly empty, she cornered me in the hallway. "You've destroyed me," she said. Her voice was low, venomous, completely different from the composed socialite she'd played for 40 years. "You've destroyed everything I built, everything I sacrificed for this family." "I didn't destroy anything," I said. "I just told the truth." "The truth?" She laughed bitterly. "The truth is that I took in another woman's baby when I didn't have to. The truth is that I raised you when your father was too broken to do it himself. The truth is that I gave you a home, food, clothing, education, everything a child could need, and you repay me by humiliating me in front of everyone I know." "You gave me material things," I said, "and you made sure I knew I wasn't worth any of them. You made me feel like a burden every day of my life. You intercepted letters from my grandmother. You created fake evidence to make my family think I was the villain, and you stole years of my life that I can never get back." "I did what I had to do to protect my family." "I was your family. At least, I was supposed to be. You were never my family." The words came out harsh, ugly, truthful, in a way Margaret had never allowed herself to be before. "You were a reminder of her, of Elena. Every time I looked at you, I saw her face, heard her voice, remembered that Richard never loved me the way he loved her. I was a replacement, Rachel, a placeholder, and you were the proof." I stared at her. For the first time in my life, I felt something close to pity. "That's not my fault," I said. "I was a baby. I didn't ask to be born. I didn't ask for my mother to die. I didn't ask to be raised by someone who resented me for existing." "No, you didn't." Margaret's voice cracked slightly. "But you were there anyway. Every day, reminding me of what I wasn't good enough to be. And I couldn't. I couldn't find it in myself to love you the way I should have. I tried. In the beginning, I really tried. But every time I looked at you, all I could see was her. So you took it out on me. You punished me for something that happened before I was born." "Yes." She didn't even try to deny it. "And I'm not asking for your forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it. I'm just telling you why. Because you asked once when you were 14. You asked your father why I treated you differently. And I've always known that question haunted you. It did. Well, now you have your answer. I was jealous of a dead woman, and I took it out on her child. That's the truth, Rachel. The ugly, unforgivable truth. I looked at this woman who had made my life so difficult for so long. I saw the lines on her face, the weariness in her eyes, the weight of decades of bitterness and resentment. I saw someone who had been given a choice and had made the wrong one over and over again until wrong became the only thing she knew how to do. "I'm going to go now," I said. "I'm going to go meet my grandmother, the one you told me was dead. I'm going to build a relationship with my mother's family, the ones you cut me off from. And I'm going to take my father's money, the money he saved for me, and I'm going to use it to create the life I should have had." And what about me? I thought about that question, about what I wanted for Margaret, about what I thought she deserved. "I think you've already punished yourself more than I ever could," I said finally. "You spent 40 years married to a man who didn't love you, raising a child you couldn't love, keeping secrets that ate away at you from the inside. You lost. Margaret. You lost a long time ago, and you didn't even realize it. So that's it? You're just going to walk away?" "I'm going to walk towards something," I said. "For the first time in my life, I have somewhere to go. Someone waiting for me. A family that wants me. And honestly, that's more than I ever had here." I turned to leave. "Rachel." Margaret's voice stopped me. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't be what you needed." I didn't turn around. "I believe you, but it doesn't change anything." And I walked out of that house for the last time. The next 6 months were the most transformative of my life. I met my grandmother 3 days after the funeral. Rosa Vasquez was 78 years old, with silver hair and eyes so much like mine that I had to catch my breath when I saw her. She lived in a small apartment in North Philadelphia, surrounded by photos of my mother, of me as a baby, of a family I never knew existed. She cried when she saw me. I cried too. We held each other for a long time, neither of us able to speak, 30 years of separation dissolving in that embrace. "I never gave up," she told me. "I wrote to you every year, every birthday, every holiday, every time I saw something that made me think of you." Margaret returned the letters at first, then she stopped responding altogether. But I never stopped writing. I never stopped hoping. She showed me the storage unit. It was full of gifts, birthday presents still in their wrapping paper, Christmas gifts with faded bows, graduation cards, photo albums she'd compiled of family gatherings where my absence was noted in every frame. There was a quilt my mother had started making before I was born, which Rosa had finished in her memory. There was a jewelry box that had belonged to my mother, filled with pieces I was supposed to inherit. There was a videotape. "Your mother made this," Rosa said, handling the tape like it was made of gold. "When she found out she was pregnant with you, she wanted you to know her in case something happened." We watched the video together, my mother, young and beautiful and so alive, talking to a camera about who she was, where she came from, what she hoped for me. She talked about falling in love with my father, about their dreams for the future, about how badly she wanted to be a mother. "I don't know what the future holds," she said on the tape, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. "But I know that whatever happens, you are already so loved. By your father, by your grandmother, by everyone who has been waiting for you. And if I'm not there to tell you this myself, I want you to know. You are wanted. You are precious. You are exactly who you were meant to be." I watched that video 17 times in the first week. I also met my Aunt Lucia, my mother's sister, and her children, my cousins, who were around my age and welcomed me into their lives like I'd always been there. They told me stories about my mother, her laugh, her stubbornness, her terrible cooking, her beautiful singing voice. They showed me photos and shared memories and slowly filled in the blank space that had existed inside me for 34 years. Meanwhile, back in New Jersey, Margaret's world was falling apart. Gregory Collins had been busy. The estate documents my father had prepared were ironclad. Everything that could legally be removed from Margaret's control had been. The house, which was in my father's name only, was to be sold and the proceeds split between me and a charity for orphaned children. My father's business shares went into trust for me. His retirement accounts were split between me and Claire, with specific provisions preventing Margaret from accessing any of it. Margaret was left with her personal savings, the joint accounts she and my father had shared, and the contents of the house that weren't specifically bequeathed to someone else. It was enough to live on, but it was a fraction of what she'd expected. The social fallout was even more devastating. Word spread quickly through their social circle about what had happened at the funeral. People who had attended, who had witnessed the revelation, told others. The story grew